Hello, I'm Chris Hardaway. Welcome to this edition of The Best Times, a series that looks at life after 50. Chances are you've never heard of Memphian Phoebe Omlie, even though she was the first woman in America to hold a civilian pilot's license and was a friend and confidant of Amelia Earhart. Historian Janan Sherman spent 17 years researching and writing the biography of Phoebe Omlie, a woman who spent her life walking on air.
Phoebe Omlie was born in 1902 and right out of high school decided she wanted to fly, figured out a way to get her hands on an airplane, and taught herself to do stunts, hoping to sell them to the movies.
Phoebe Fairgrave was still a teenager in 1921 when she met World War I veteran Vernon Omlie. He was the only pilot at the airport willing to teach a woman how to fly. They teamed up to fly stunts for movies and go barnstorming across the Midwest, with Phoebe dancing atop the wing of Vernon's plane.
She was both brave and very determined about what she wanted to do. But it was scary times. There weren't any safety belts or, no gear of any kind. She put suction cups on the bottom of her sneakers in order to help her keep her footing on the wings. It was not very good life expectancy for that sort of work. Plus, it didn't pay worth a hoot. Again, in Vernon's logbook, he's keeping track of money in and money out. And sometimes they didn't clear $10 for a month.
The 1922 flying season ended at the Mid-South Fair in Memphis, and so did Phoebe's barnstorming career. Phoebe and Vernon had to pawn their luggage to get enough money to pay their hotel bill. They had gotten married earlier that year, and Vernon felt that Memphis offered good opportunities, so they settled here. By 1926, they had teamed with other air enthusiasts to open Memphis's first airport. Vernon and Phoebe established Mid-South Airways, offering flying lessons, cargo transport, crop dusting, and airplane sales.
And they're trying to build a legitimate business. What really helps them, actually, is the flood of 1927. But now this is a way to establish a useful legitimacy, and they were flying the mail from Little Rock. They were picking up people stranded on sandbars. They were bringing in medicine. This was really, really dangerous work. And all of a sudden, people start rethinking about what this flying stuff's all about.
That same year, the world's most famous aviator stopped in Memphis on his cross-country celebratory tour promoting aviation. Within 2 years of that visit, Memphis opened its first municipal airport, with Vernon Omlie as manager. In 1928, Phoebe became the first woman to enter the Ford Reliability Tour, a 6,000-mile cross-country exhibition of aviation safety. She flew alone.
She refused to take anybody, including a navigator, because she said if there's a man along, they'll think he did all the flying. So I'm going alone. And so she does, and becomes the first woman to fly over the Rocky Mountains in a small plane, over the Great American Desert, as they called it in those days. It was very risky stuff.
The late 20s and early 30s was the heyday for air racing in America. The National Air Race of 1929 marked the first time women were allowed to compete. Phoebe flew alongside 20 other women, including Amelia Earhart, and she won her class. After the 1929 event, Phoebe became one of the founders of the 99s, the first organization of female pilots in the country. Amelia Earhart was elected as the organization's first president.
She and Amelia were probably as close as anybody was to Amelia. Poor Amelia. She was married to G.P. Putnam, who was a big PR guy. And he just made sure she had the latest, greatest, largest, fastest airplanes, but never was enough time to get checked out in them, never was enough time to really learn how to fly them.
In 1937, Amelia was planning her fateful around-the-world flight when Phoebe paid her a visit.
She was very, very concerned about Amelia and that last trip Amelia made, to the point where she went to Miami the night before Amelia took off and said, "Don't do it."
Phoebe's greatest air racing success came in 1931, when the National Air Races allowed women to compete in a handicapped format against men. She beat a field of 63 entrants, including 46 men, to take the title.
And that was big. That was really big. She was national news everywhere when she won that. And it came with a big purse, but mostly what she won was the publicity. And it's Eleanor Roosevelt who sends her a telegram and said, "I'd like you to consider campaigning for my husband who's running for president in 1932. And so she does.
Phoebe flew around the country campaigning for Roosevelt. Her work and her friendship with Eleanor Roosevelt earned her a political appointment in the new administration. In 1933, Phoebe became the first woman to hold an executive job in federal aeronautics. But the transition to a desk job wasn't an easy one.
It was a difficult position to be in. She wasn't trained as a bureaucrat. She was a pilot. A woman in a man's world, all of those sorts of things were very difficult. Still, one of the things that surprised me that I found in the evidence is that her expertise was very much valued. And she, in fact, worked really closely with engineers at Langley Field in aircraft design, in safety features, and that sort of thing. They really paid attention to her.
Unfortunately, it didn't take Phoebe long to hit the glass ceiling.
The only way she thought she could challenge that was just to be as competent as she could, to demonstrate that she could do this job and do it well. But it's very frustrating when it's not recognized.
In 1936, Vernon died in a plane crash as a passenger aboard a commercial flight. After his death, Phoebe stopped flying. She remained a bureaucrat throughout the war years, but became disillusioned with the Truman administration and its negative attitude towards civil aviation. In January of 1952, frustrated and embittered, Phoebe resigned from government and walked away from aviation altogether.
She becomes extremely right-wing. I mean, she goes way over to what would now be the Tea Party. At those days, it was the John Birch Society. I mean, the Tea Party and the ultra-right is not a new phenomenon in America. It just has different names. But she becomes very much enamored by that and ends up sort of devoting her last years to fighting those kinds of fights.
The last 20 years of Phoebe's life are almost a mystery, as she becomes increasingly obsessed with anti-communism, states' rights issues, and right-wing politics.
For about 12 years, she just traveled from place to place. She would stay with old aviation friends. She would stop in a town and put an ad in the paper to be a companion for elderly ladies and do light housework. And she would just keep moving. She finally ends up in Indianapolis, Indiana in 1970, and she dies 5 years later in a flea bag hotel, the kind of place where you keep your milk on the windowsill to keep it cool. It's very, very, very sad. Completely alone, completely estranged, broke, victim of lung cancer, poverty. What a sad end.
Phoebe Omlie was buried alongside her husband Vernon here in Memphis at Forest Hill Cemetery. One obituary writer wrote, "Without a plane, she was like a bird with a broken wing."